And money is one thing too. I think we internalize and ingrain our view on money so early.
Yeah.
And I realized that with my own kids of really trying to teach them to understand money is a tool. It's something that it's only useful when it's moving, and understanding that it's not something to be afraid of. It's not something to hoard. It's not something to be, you know, be mystified by. It's really trying to add, and my kids are young, so we're doing this at an early stage with them, but I want them to have a healthy relationship with money, or maybe more
Yes.
healthy than I did
Right.
growing up. I think a lot of us grow up with didn't realize we had this preconceived notion that was from our environment or our parents or early money troubles or whatever the case was, that kind of get ingrained in us at an early age. And we just take it for granted that that's the way it is. That's the way my relationship with money is. That's how money works.
Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations, and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. Can't wait to bring the show to you today. I'm so blessed to have such great guests coming on the show. This whole spring is packed full of wonderful people and big variety of individuals doing exciting things in the world and sharing their insights and their money tips and everything else with you all. So I'm going to dive in and introduce you to today's guests, and it's going to be a great show, so stick around. And I am excited to have you meet Elizabeth Bieniek. She is named one of the most influential female pioneers in technology. Elizabeth is an author, founder, and Fortune 100 leadership veteran focused on good peopling as the secret to exceptional execution. After turning corporate innovation on its head with her own unconventional success story, Elizabeth now helps leaders tap into the individual genius within their teams to unlock unrivaled motivation and uncover joy in the journey. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here. I'm so excited. And I love the title of your book, Cake on Tuesday. So we're going to get to that and talk about that. But yeah, that is a very fun title and very intriguing. And so, yeah, talk to me a little about, where you came from and how you got to this place.
Sure. Yeah, I took the scenic journey in most of my life and career. I definitely went a unique way, I think. And that does lead to, I'm sure we'll get into Cake on Tuesday, but that does lead to why I have a non-traditional title to my book, because I do feel that pretty much everything I did in my life and career has been non-traditional. I finally, at enough decades in, decided to embrace that and just lean into it. But I started out in very different fields. I worked in publishing and higher education. I had my undergrad is in English before I pursued my MBA, and then I like to say fell into technology. But I think coming into tech from the outside really, in hindsight, allowed me to have a superpower of being able to look at things with fresh eyes. And ultimately, that's what led to success in that field, is being able to come at things without being encumbered by bias, without having an idea of how it should be done. So I was able to ask those really basic, fun, simple questions of why, and could we do it differently, and how could we look at this differently, and what could we explore? And that opened up some really great possibilities in innovation.
I love that. I love unconventional journeys because I think honestly that's the best. It results in the best outcome in life, really, in the end. I think, trying to map it out and stick to the map, I don't know, that works for sometimes, but usually it's a little
Hasn't
more
worked for me
interesting.
yet. I don't know.
Yeah, it didn't work for me either. So, I guess I have to support that. So when you fell into tech, what were you doing in tech?
I was coming from higher education at the time where I was managing a team of basically junior accountants and IT professionals. And when I first moved into tech, I moved into a capacity that was more looking operationally at how the business runs and can I apply some of that financial acumen to looking at our tech operations. I was doing some financial forecasting, working with manufacturing and looking at can we make some judgment calls on how we're processing things for future quarters, using different and unique information. I was pretty short-lived in that role, actually. It was a good entry point, but it allowed me to really look and say, okay, some of these processes, this doesn't make sense. Okay, you asked me to do this, but why? And I've always been driven by the understanding of wanting to know why. I was probably a very annoying child in hindsight, but really wanting to understand the why behind the actions that we're doing. And so I think it was maybe 9 months in that role, and a woman that I had met who worked in a tangential role, she ended up getting tasked with a job that was looking across business operations in the finance department and basically looking at how do we make things better. And I think she had come across me raising my hand in one too many meetings and asking why one too many times. She's like, I have the opportunity to hire one person to join my team right now. I think this might be a good fit for you because I really need somebody who's going to dig in and understand the why and talk to people across the organization and understand what's the end goal of what we're trying to do. And can we come up with a better product and system to do that? And that was step one in a very long journey of poking holes.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you ask why a lot because I do too. And it does drive
my kids do too.
It drives my family nuts, but it also drives other people nuts and it gets misinterpreted. And it really comes from a place of curiosity, right? I mean,
right, exactly.
I really genuinely am interested. And we've been redoing an investment property and the guy who's developing it and doing everything, designing it, doing the remodel, everything. He can't stand it when I ask him why. And I'm always asking because I genuinely just want to learn. And he thinks it means I don't trust him because I keep asking why. And so it's become a huge thing, actually. I don't think we like each other that much.
Trying to frame it in the right way, that it's from a point of basic curiosity and the fact of like, I want to understand so that I can do my job better, not so I can check up on if you're doing your job well.
Yeah, I know.
But I think that is usually
it's a good lesson for people who, if they have consultants in or whatever, and they're asking them why. I mean, even coaches ask a lot of why questions, but it's just to understand better. So, okay. So from there, what are some of the takeaways that you kind of came away with that you're now talking about on podcasts and other platforms?
Yeah, I think the idea of not having the preconceived notions in that field really translates to a lot of different areas in life. And, we all have this idea when we were kids of like, I'm going to be this. I thought when I was 10, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian.
Me too.
And I think you just love animals at a certain age and feel like, oh, you're going to be a vet. Realizing that most of us end up working in fields that we didn't even know existed when we were kids and maybe didn't exist when we were kids because things change and technology changes and business changes. So I think really looking at that side of business and realizing there's so many preconceived notions in so many different areas that when you do ask the honest why, sometimes you can start unlocking and opening these doors to new opportunities that didn't exist before. And maybe there wasn't the right confluence of events for everything to come together for that position or role or opportunity to exist. So really leaning into it, that embracing that. I think it took a while into my career to realize that. You always think when you're first starting out and you see people in senior roles who are very visible, out front, visionary leaders, you're like, they have it all together. They know what they're doing. They've got this all sorted. And then you realize we're all just trying to figure out our way. And each of us is on a journey. And some people are better at conveying confidence when they may or may not have that confidence. And that's a skill set in and of itself. But you start realizing there's all these preconceived notions that we took for granted, and not all of them are founded on anything real. So I think that element is what has translated into every other jump in my career. Really understanding that there's there is no defined, this is the one and only way. There is room to ask the generally curious why. There is room to explore a new way of doing it. And that's what ultimately led me into the space of innovation, because innovation is really just looking at, can we do what we've been doing in a new or different way, or can we do something new or different that is somehow related to the field that we're in and get a new outcome from this? It's really just embracing the new and unknown. And that gets me excited. I thought that got everybody excited, but I realized later that, oh, okay, some people are terrified by that, but that gets me excited.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it is terrifying to a lot of people, but it's so needed. And I almost feel like there's this undercurrent in the world right now where almost everything needs to come apart and be rethought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even, we've had all these fires, and it's like you immediately think, wow, we should really rethink how we build homes. We should really rethink so many things right now. And there's always a lot of resistance to trying new things, but it is an opportunity. And as the whole time you were talking, I'm just thinking how relevant everything you were saying is to how people interact with their money. Because we don't ask ourselves why about that either. We do things for the longest time the same way, and often with relatively poor results. And we don't stop along the way and ask, why every time you get out of debt do you get back in? Why are you not investing?
Yeah.
Why haven't you looked for that new job? I mean, we should have somebody like you coming into our homes and asking why we're doing all the things we're doing. So
yeah, money is one thing too. I think we internalize and ingrain our view on money so early.
Yeah.
And I realized that with my own kids, of really trying to teach them to understand money is a tool. It's something that it's only useful when it's moving, and understanding that it's not something to be afraid of. It's not something to hoard. It's not something to be mystified by. It's really trying to add, and my kids are young, so we're doing this at an early stage with them, but I want them to have a healthy relationship with money, or maybe more healthy than I did growing up. I think a lot of us grow up didn't realize we had this preconceived notion that was from our environment or our parents or early money troubles or whatever the case was, that kind of get ingrained in us at an early age. And we just take it for granted that that's the way it is. That's the way my relationship with money is. That's how money works. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's founded on something that's completely not true. And it's so hard to unlearn things. So trying at least my kids to start fresh.
Well, and it sounds like your kids are pretty young. And I think I recently there was a guest on, Jennifer Fishman, who is an educator trying to bring money into the schools. And so I automatically assume she's, bringing it to the high schools. But there was a lot of science behind the fact that you need to bring it into the elementary schools. I mean, obviously, at an elementary school level, but without starting there, it's almost like too late by the time, without some of the basics laid out. And I thought that was fascinating, because I would have never thought, to...
You pick things up early. I have 2 in elementary and 1 in preschool, so they're still pretty young. I can get them early.
Yeah.
But my oldest one, she loves the going over money in math class, because they're just going over it. It makes a lot of sense to her, understand making change and that kind of a thing. Yeah. And I love it because we get in these conversations about like, okay, well, you get this much money for your birthday, and what could you use that for? And if you do this, you get change for that. And it's just great to see, because she starts looking at it with this air of possibility of, okay, I got $20 for my birthday. Here's all the things I could do with it. I could buy my friend a present with it, but then I could still have some to put in my piggy bank, but then I could have some. And it's great to see that kind of opening up of, yes, money is something that unlocks opportunity. Mm-hmm. That is the main value of money in my mind.
Well, and that's a great message for anybody, because that is a good relationship with money, seeing it as, a path to opportunity. Whereas, we know there are many parents saying, oh my gosh, put all of that away. Don't touch it, because someday you might need it. It could be, there's so many messages out there. So to be very conscious of how you're presenting it to your kids, is really, plus I feel like it reinforces it for yourself. It's good for everybody. So
anytime you have to teach something, you get really down to the nitty gritty of what you really believe.
Exactly. So when you're focusing on innovation, because I think we all need to be innovating all the time. I mean, if you have a small business, you know, if you have a large business, if you have a family, I mean, innovation is key pretty much to everything. You should be innovating yourself all the time. So how do you integrate that, or how would you have people integrate that into their businesses or their lives, the things that you've learned?
Yeah, well, I think you hit on it, Michelle. It's that idea of we should be innovative in all areas of life. I have talked a lot about on the idea of demystifying innovation. And I think because I worked in an innovation capacity inside of corporate big tech, that environment, a lot of times we can over glorify innovation. We can call it like, well, there's this certain group that they do innovation, so they're the people that are going to innovate, and I don't have to worry about that in my job because we've got this separate innovation group that does that. And we sort of put it on this pedestal or put it over in this separate corner or department, and think that excuses us from having to be involved in that. And I think you are absolutely correct that we should be innovative in all areas of our life. I mean, still in the month of January at the moment as we're having this chat, and people are being very innovative about their health as they're heading into the new year. A lot of New Year's resolutions come out of being innovative about how I want to change my health, my life, my priorities, my focus on things for the new year. And I like to take the message of innovation and say it's something that it's universal. It covers everybody in every geography, industry, walk of life. You can be innovative in the way that you treat your customers. You can be innovative in your internal processes. You can be innovative in the way you raise your kids. You can be innovative in the way that you cook your meals. You can be innovative in just about anything, because it's really just looking at, am I constantly improving? Am I looking for new and different and better ways to do things? Am I open to the possibility of that? Sometimes it's just simply having an innovative mindset of being open and receptive to when you're approached with a person or idea or concept that is different. Do you entertain that? And sometimes it's just starting there. Do I have an innovative mindset in that I'm receptive to innovation?
Yeah, and how do you cultivate an innovative mindset? As you're talking, I'm thinking too, you know, we all know the saying now. I don't know how it got so common, but, you know, if you just continue to do the same thing over and over, you know, expecting a different result, then that's insanity. So, but then, so we kind of know that. But then we don't necessarily do anything about it or know how to do anything about it. And so I'm trying to figure out, where's the trigger point? Like, how long do you go having a problem before you say, you know, I need to innovate something here?
Yeah, inertia is real.
Yeah.
Inertia is a big thing, and comfort is a big thing, and fear is a big thing. And I think you start getting into all of those topics when you start talking about change. And again, we raised the topic of kids, so now I feel like I'm bringing it back to kids. But trying to teach them the idea of a certain level of discomfort is good. Last year, I read the book, The Comfort Crisis, and I thought that was a great book. And I know it got really popular at a certain time. I think it just hit the world at the right time. But realizing how much in our current society everything is customized to comfort. And we don't want anything to go too long. We don't be hungry for too long. Food can just arrive. We don't be cold for too long. Just turn the heat up. We don't want to have to walk too far to get something. Just call an Uber. Like, we get really easily fall into these tracks of being comfortable. And on the one hand, that's great. It means we're living in a first world society and we have all these wonderful amenities. But realizing that if you don't have some element of struggle and pushback, you're not going to grow. And so we need to get a little bit more comfortable with discomfort, and realizing that discomfort is where growth happens. I mean, you're never going to get stronger muscles if you never put them through pain and exercise. You're never going to have an expanded mind if you're not constantly taxing it and introducing it to these new ideas that are forcing you to expand your approach to it. So I think a lot of it starts with that, of really embracing discomfort and realizing if you're completely comfortable where you are, you don't see a need to change, then that's probably the big signal that you do need some change. Because if you're comfortable for too long, you get stuck in this rut. And the only difference between a rut and a grave, right? They say the depth.
Yeah, very interesting. That's actually the opposite of where I was going, because I wasn't thinking about comfort. I was thinking about discomfort, like being in a situation that you don't like for, like, how long will you tolerate that? But that's a really interesting point, is Yeah, we definitely can stay in a comfort zone too long.
Yeah, I think a lot of times though we get comfortable with the discomfort to the wrong kind of discomfort. Like people will get comfortable in a job because it's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the best thing for them. It's not stimulating or challenging, or it might be unhealthy or toxic in some way, whatever the case is, but it's familiar and we're comfortable with the familiarity. So we tolerate a different level of discomfort because it's familiar rather than it can be uncomfortable and painful to reach out, to try something new, to go from a place where everybody knows you and you have a reputation, you don't have to work that hard to build up that reputation, to go someplace and start completely new. It's almost like applying that discomfort to a different part of your life of be okay with not being so familiar, and can you embrace a new level of discomfort to go into the unknown? And that's bring us back to innovation. I mean, that's what I get excited about innovation, is because you're constantly dealing with unknown unknowns. And I find that wildly exciting because that means your possibilities are endless. But I do find a lot of people encounter that, and I totally understand the perspective of people who look at that as ultimately terrifying because you don't know what you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
So unknown unknowns can have a very different reaction and very different personalities.
Yeah, very interesting. And again, thinking about money, it's a great point that maybe comfort zone is the wrong term because you're not necessarily comfortable, but you are familiar. And I really like that because even with sort of a poor relationship with money, you can get very familiar and comfortable in that. Whatever it is, even in the stress, you can complain all the time about how stressful money is and how broke you always feel or whatever, but it becomes habitual. And even though you don't like it and you don't want it, you kind of know what to do with it, you know who to talk to about it, and you know what to expect. It's going to look the same next month that it did this month. And even though it doesn't feel good, so I think that's a really important point. And when then you feel trapped because you're so familiar with it that I don't know, you do lose sight of the opportunity to break out of that pattern.
Yeah. And I think it's just human nature. We tend to look at something of, let's take a job move, for instance, as something, as an example. Like, I don't want to keep going in this current job. It's not going to get me long term where I want to go, but it is familiar. It might be uncomfortable in some ways, but it is familiar. But we tend to look at things as, if I leave this and I go to the next thing, then I'm going to have to start all over at square one. And it's going to be, it took me 5 years to get to this point. If I go to another position, it's going to take me 5 years to even get back to where I was over there. Yeah. We look at things so black and white in that regard, when in reality, there's so much transferable skills. Even if you go into an entirely different industry, if you go from, you could be an engineer in high tech and now you want to go manage a coffee shop. It could be a very different skill set. But yes, you might have to learn certain things from the ground up, how to make coffee, how to run the inventory, how to manage the customers. But you have so many transferable skills from problem solving, or running multiple things at the same time, or relationships with the other people on the team that you work with at the other place, that you have those skills with you when you go into the new role. It's not starting at zero, and it's not going to be the same path. But I think that is just human nature. We look at it as like, oh man, I got to start over, got to do everything all over again. Nothing's going to translate. Nobody's going to know me. And we kind of talk ourselves out of it, when in reality, you might take a step back, proverbial back, but you will move forward so much quicker because you have all these skills in your repertoire.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea, because there is a negativity bias when you think about change. I hear it a lot with people in career transition too. Well, I'll go somewhere new and, I hate where I'm at, but it could be worse at the next place. Right. Or like you say, I'll have to work my way back up, which oftentimes is not the case, but it's just what we think. Or if they want to change industries altogether, there's this idea I'll have to start at the very bottom and make, a quarter of what I've been making. And, these are not necessarily true. But I mean, sometimes
a lot of it goes into those money mindset biases that we have from when we were kids or growing up. We just have these preconceived notions in there. And a lot of times we don't even realize it and don't even identify them. And I work with a personal coach, a career coach. And I think everybody should have somebody that they're speaking into their life, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a mentor, whatever the case is. And that's something we talked about early on in our relationship about money concepts and preconceived notions and things that we had internalized. And I realized a lot of my view on certain things in the realm of money in particular came from the fact that I grew up very poor. We were below the poverty level in upstate rural New York when I was growing up. And I was telling him this one story of like, I think the first time I remember, I think it was 14, the first time I remember having clothes with tags on it, like meaning they were new. And I'm like, just certain things about that stuck with me. I realized that in certain scenarios, I would just naturally approach at it from a position of lack rather than abundance, and realizing I didn't even know I was doing it because it was just so ingrained and so natural. And so I always came from it feeling like, well, I had all these years of we don't have, so let's hang on to, let's hoard, let's do whatever, because that was just natural and normal, and that was your viewpoint. And I had wonderful parents who were not lack mentality people, despite the fact that we went through a season of life where we did not have much. It wasn't coming from them. It wasn't that I had bad parents that gave me bad messages. I had good parents that gave me good messages, but I internalized other things about just seeing my surrounding and seeing what we didn't have and seeing times that they might not show their stress, but I might internalize my own stress based on the situation, knowing like, oh, that we don't know when the next thing is coming. And so you realize that all of these things that form us through our lives make these really complex relationships with different areas, money being one of them, and that if you don't take a moment and pause and look at it and say, what's actually motivating my thought process there? Like, I don't want to take this action. Why? Is it because I don't actually want to do it? Is it because I'm scared to do it? Is it because I've already defeated myself by telling myself I'm going to fail? Because, well, why? Based on what? And I think going through that process sometimes is really helpful to talk that through with somebody else and realize they can help you poke holes at that and point out things that are like, where are you getting that information from? What are you basing that on? Because that could be a fallacy that you're starting with.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that's the beauty of, coaching or mentorship or whatever you want to call it, is just get at that person trying to figure out why you think what you think, why you do what you do, and to identify certain things as patterns that aren't necessarily, maybe some of them are serving you, some of them aren't. So, but we can't see it easily in ourselves. And that's
it's always hardest to notice things in yourself, for sure.
It's really hard. So people who think, oh, I'll just figure it out myself. I mean, I suppose you can over a very long period of time if you do the right things, but it's not easy. So
life's short. I don't have that kind of time.
Exactly. Just like the firm that hired you to come in and look at it. I mean, it couldn't do it either. So why don't you tell us a little about Cake on Tuesday? Because I'm curious.
Sure. So I mentioned I fell into technology, but after a lot of asking why and jumping around to different roles and exploring new sides of technology, I ended up finding myself in a situation where I was able to build and run a stealth startup inside of big tech where we were building something very innovative. And it was a wild and fun journey. It was in the space of augmented reality. We were building an end-to-end holographic collaboration system. It was at the time something the industry had never seen before. When we embarked on it, we didn't even know if it was technologically feasible. We were really building the impossible. And it was wildly exciting. I ran that for several phases over the span of several years, and it was just a go, go, go for so long. When we finally got to the point where we successfully handed it off to the business unit to productize, and I was able to take a step back and just breathe and say, whew, that was a wild journey. What have we done? Do I want to do something like this again? What did I learn out of this? What do I do next? I had a chance to really just pause and think about that whole journey and start jotting down kind of like a postmortem for myself of what did I learn through that? What would I do different? And as I was writing, it just started being more and more and more, and realizing this is more than just a couple notes for myself for my next step. This would probably be really helpful for somebody else trying to do any sort of crazy entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial venture. I learned a lot through this process because I wasn't necessarily set out to do most of these things. They just kind of rolled phase into phase, and one one phase would unlock another opportunity, another phase. And so I started capturing all those thoughts and then parsing them out into different sections and seeing the patterns. And it broke down into 5 main parts. The first 3 all being about starting, because it's so hard to start an idea and to move it forward.
Oh, I love that. Because you're right. Yeah.
The 4th section was about leading through the barren middles, what it's titled. And it's all about when the going gets rough, when things get really hard, when everybody's tempted to quit, when you want to quit. How do you not only push through that, motivate yourself through that, but how do you motivate a team to go through that? And then the 5th section is insights from the rearview mirror, which is all about the lessons that you don't necessarily know when you're in them, but you see them when you're on the other side of it. And so that formed itself into the subtitle for the book is 25 Lessons to Unlock Corporate Innovation. But the main title is Cake on Tuesday, because why not? I mean, there's too many business books out there with really boring titles.
I love that.
And this was very conversational. I wrote it in a way, I had several people read it and say, I felt like I was just sitting down and having coffee with you and we're chatting. Like, that's the tone of the book. And it is written as 25 little snippets of things that I learned along the way that, hey, these might help you in your journey. This is what I did. This is what worked. This is what didn't. And it's meant to just be that, very conversational. Cake on Tuesday specifically came from, there's one chapter in there called Have Cake on Tuesday. And that came from a stretch in the project where it was hard to find motivation. We were past all the first couple phases where things were really exciting and new, but we still had a long ways to go before this was a completed project. And I was having a conversation with my ops manager, Ashley, and she and I were just brainstorming, how do we inject some fun into this? How do we add a milestone when there's not really a milestone? How do we find something to celebrate? And she had the idea of creating this Wheel of Fortune style Wheel of Winning and spinning it at the end of staff meetings. So we would just put everybody's name on it and she would spin it. And if it landed on your name, we would just send you a cake. We had a global team that was spread across 4 different countries, 9 different hours and time zones. And so we were usually meeting virtually, and it was a way we could just ship anybody a cake. And so if you landed on you, it's like, Michelle, you won. You got a cake for no reason, just because you're Michelle and it's Tuesday. Our staff meetings were on Tuesday. So that's where Cake on Tuesday came from.
That's actually so clever for companies listening to this. What a great, fun
It was
thing.
Such an inexpensive way to be highly motivating, too.
Yeah, I love that. And it does kind of inject some nice lightness into all the hard work going into this. So,
yeah. And if you're working remotely, far from your team on a busy project and just a cake shows up at your door, I mean, it's kind of hard not to smile.
yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, I love that. And I love the phases of the book, especially, well, I don't know, I like all 3 phases actually, but I really love the getting started one because I personally have an issue with I have no issue with ideas, but I have an issue with the execution of the ideas. So I don't know if that's the
that's why
started.
I overly biased it on starting. I have 3 sections literally on starting. So the first 3, I'm like, well, the first one is starting is hard. The second one is setting your idea in motion. And the third one is add oil and reduce friction. It's all about once you have started moving, but you need to get moving faster or better, smoother. Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
Yeah.
But I can lump them all into starting because starting is hard.
Starting is hard. And then actually, it is true. There are phases. You get rolling and then you kind of get bored in the middle. It's like, you're tired of it. The idea isn't fresh anymore. And then toward the end, there's just, that wrap up is also very challenging.
You usually find people who are like, we're great at starts. They get really motivated by starts, or they're great at conclusions. They get really satisfied with wrapping everything up with a bow. And it's usually don't meet people like, I'm so excited by middles.
Interesting.
Middles can be hard. So I think the way we address that, especially if you are in something in a space like innovation where it's usually flashy and exciting and fast paced, middles can be really hard because it can feel like a slog. So finding creative ways to work your way through that was definitely one of the lessons I learned through this process.
I love that. Well, I love that for big projects and giant innovations like what you're talking about, but I also like it for the small stuff like getting your money in order. I mean, organizing your finances, doing a budget. I mean, these are little things. Yeah. But they don't get done. I mean,
right.
It's it does take some time, take some effort, so I think that has application all over the place. That sounds really good. So, yeah.
Finding a motivation hack. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do. Find a motivation hack for your team, find a motivation hack for yourself. I mean,
Right.
what you're just mentioning, yeah, a lot of those things are not sexy or exciting, but they need to get done. And how do you celebrate that? How do you congratulate yourself on doing that? How do you
Right.
motivate yourself to do it? And sometimes it is just a little thing of like, I'm going to get this thing done and I'm going to go for a walk or I'm going to go get a latte or whatever the case is. Like, it doesn't have to be big, but we're all creatures that get motivated by milestones and completion and having something to drive forward. And sometimes it's just silly competition too. I mean, there's times where, my husband and I are like, who can clean the kitchen faster? Like, "Hey, this is your half, my half." I mean, you just gamify
We don't get to
everything
play that
because
game in my house. That would be fun, though. Yeah.
you just try to make things more fun and interesting. And I talk about that in Cake on Tuesday because it's the same thing of having a virtual team. That part of the time we went through this was during the global pandemic. And that was hard to have a virtual team that couldn't get together for, I think we went like a couple of years. Before
Right.
that, we were get together at least once a quarter. And that would be something that kind of get you through, the next couple months. But when you can't do that for a long period of time, it's hard to have that camaraderie and that feeling of togetherness. And just realizing how much silly games and things were important. We would have these little Olympic games and things like that. And we had one I particularly talk about in the book because it really stood out in my mind is we had this one little contest where we were all on a video call and we had to see who could construct and fly a paper airplane the farthest. And you were on the honor system to measure your own distance, all that. But our winner was our product manager in Ireland because her home office was on the second floor and she chucked it out the window because nobody said you couldn't.
I love
Like,
that.
perfect. Way to be innovative. Way to think of a different way of doing it.
Yeah, and I can feel the kind of joy and trying to make these projects fun, which I do think people see a project and they're really inspired by the idea for it.
Yeah.
But it gets very heavy as people
Yes.
work on it, and there's stress, there's timelines. You don't see a lot of this kind of like fun in it.
Yes, but you realize how important it is. And I like to always talk about, you look at the really stressful industries like firefighters or paramedics or those types of things where it's a life and death situation. Usually people that work in those fields have some of the best senses of humor because I think you need to balance gravity and levity. And the more you have one, the more you need the other. I do think fun in corporate gets a bad rap. And we're talking about early experiences that shape us in life. And I just had a flashback to my first corporate job, my very first review. And I went into my boss's office and I had this review and she was explaining, what I'd done well and done poorly. And one of the criticisms I got was, well, you kind of smile a lot and you laugh a lot.
Oh,
And that could be perceived that you're just goofing off and having too much fun and not really working hard. And I remember that just floored me. And I remember sitting there and looking across the table at her and saying, what is the action you want me to take from? Do you want me to look more upset and depressed? Like, what are you telling me to do here? And I think that just really shaped a lot of my viewpoint of I'm somebody that I love to laugh. I love to goof around. I work hard, but I also play hard. And I think that's so important because I work harder when I'm playing harder. And I've taken that into other work environments. And I think realizing that review just stuck in my head for so long and realizing that there is this sort of bad rap of, oh, you can't goof off at work, you can't have fun at work because that means you're not serious about it. You're not like, really? Who wants to go to a morose, boring environment where they can't laugh or they're going to get dinged as a bad thing if they look like they're having too much fun? So what can I do to completely blow up that stereotype and turn it on its head?
Well, I love that. I know it's crazy the comments that performance reviewers offer up.
I have a few friends who are recruiters, and some of the things they've told me in those conversations too.
Yeah.
They should write books.
Yeah, for sure. But I love that, and I do agree. And I agree that I usually try to make the case that money should be fun, because it's just, it's like any relationship. If you treat it like it's awful and it's boring and it's just an icky thing, you're not going to participate, obviously. And if you can try to make it fun in whatever way that is, maybe you're doing it out by the pool and putting your budget together somewhere better than, your kitchen table. I don't know what it is, but for everybody it's different. But I feel like it's so important to tie these things together, whether it's, work and fun, or, nobody wants this image of all of these things just being drudgery. And
yeah, absolutely. I think changing to the perception of money as a thing to money as a key. I think the most useful thing my grandmother ever told me when I was a kid is that money has no value until you use it. And I thought that was really important. And again, another thing that stuck with me, because it did challenge a little bit of my perception. I always thought money is like a thing. You have it or you don't have it.
Right.
You need more of it. But it's not any value to you if it's just sitting there in a pile.
Right.
It's really a key to unlock opportunity. And so when you look at that of how can I use it to unlock something, well, great. Then it's money and I together trying to do something rather than me against money. I don't have enough. It's a very different mindset.
Very different mindset. And the minute you become aware of that, I think it's a game changer. So.
Yeah, for me, that was much too late in life. So I'm trying to make that earlier for my kids.
Yeah, no, and it's never too late. You do lose some ground, but you suffer a little, but it's still never too late. But it is great that you're doing that for your kids, because it's just, it'll, get them off to a great start. But in terms of this, innovation, that word to me it is fun. When I think of innovation, I think of...
Yeah, what does that mean to you? Because everybody has a different opinion.
It's creative, it's fun, it's exciting. I don't associate that with any negative ideas, really. So I think it should be fun. It should be a fun process, even though it might be a hard process. And I think kind of that's the way everything should be, but as much as possible. So, yeah. And so how did you... where are you now? You're talking about all of these things around innovation. What is sort of your mission at this point?
Yeah, so writing Cake on Tuesday was a dangerous thing, I think, because it really opened up a whole new realm of possibilities. I really enjoyed the writing process. I really enjoyed the idea of, well, if I was going to use this information that I learned the hard way and use it to help somebody else in their journey, how would I do that? How would I break it down to its simplest form, but useful enough that it would be a nugget of truth that they could use to move forward? And I really enjoyed that process and that exercise. And I ended up, I mentioned it started as a thought process of what do I do next, and how do I take these learnings and apply it to the next thing. And I took some time and really thought about, do I want to do another entrepreneurial venture, another innovation project inside of a organization? Do I want to do my own startup? Or do I want to help other people in their journey? And I really found myself gravitating towards that third option. And so I left corporate America just under a year ago and launched out on my own, started my own website, elizabethbieniek.com, and I used Cake on Tuesday to kind of push along in that realm. And I've really been focused in writing, speaking, and some consulting work in that space. But even that, I feel like I keep innovating and disrupting myself because I was focusing more on consulting initially, and I'm shifting a little bit more to teaching and training now, because I'm realizing consulting, a lot of times you're coming in when there's already a problem, and how do we fix the problem that's already there? Whereas if I can focus more on teaching and training, I'm more on focusing on helping you avoid the problem in the first case. So I like that idea because I feel like it's a better path for what I'm passionate about, rather than, hey, you already screwed up here. Let's see if we can solve that. Hey, maybe I can keep you from screwing up because I've already screwed up a lot of times. And let me show you what worked and didn't work for me. And I really enjoy that. So I'm pivoting more in 2025 towards training and instruction.
Nice. Okay. And I see we have your website up there so people can reach out to you. Is that... if they, well, obviously they can find your book
ElizabethBieniek.com, or I'm at Cake on Tuesday on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
and reach out to me, connect at elizabethbieniek.com.
Yeah, great for speaking opportunities, and especially in companies, I would think. That sounds really great.
Corporate environments specifically that
Yeah.
are looking for better ways to employ innovation or add some fun and levity into your organization.
Yeah, that's okay. That is great, and feeds into the whole idea of building a culture too, I think, which is
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
important these days. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. I love talking to you, and I think there were so many important nuggets in that conversation, and I hope it inspires people to just look at their own lives and whatever it is that they're doing in their career or business, to think in a more innovative way. As we forget, we're busy. We're working on
Exactly.
whatever we're working on, and we forget to be innovative, or that it's important to
Exactly.
stop.
We're never too busy to pause and think.
Yeah,
Thank you so
I
much
know.
for
And
having me, Michelle.
I will
Appreciate
ask
that.
this
Yeah.
last question. So, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who they need a little thinking time. They need to up level to that visionary that they're supposed to be, and find time for that where they can, kind of come up with some innovative ideas. So what do you have a recommendation for that when people do feel like, I'm so busy, I can't step away and, sit there with a pad of paper?
Yeah, I would say two things come to mind very readily. One being, don't think of it as a luxury of, okay, I just gotta find time. Yeah, I don't know if I really have that time, like carve it out. I really should be doing these other things. We tend to devalue it and look at it as a luxury of when I have the time. When in reality, if you look at it more as a necessity to ensure that you are on track and going in the right direction. A lot of times we spend too much time optimizing the thing we're currently doing, make it more efficient, make it faster, make it cheaper. But we don't stop and pause and think, are we doing the right thing? Are we going in the right direction?
Yeah.
And when we stop and do that, it's a much better return on the time we're investing in it. So one, reframing the way we're thinking. The second thing, I have a recurring theme through Cake on Tuesday, which is all about going outside. And this is both figurative and literal. There are times, a lot of times, I think we can get stuck in the rut of, well, I'm in my office, I've got all these other things, my phone's ringing, I got people stopping by my desk, or we're in a home office and we've got everything in our home surrounding us. I'm like, okay, I don't want to look over at the laundry and the clutter and everything else over there. Sometimes we need to physically just get outside. There's something about just getting the wind on your face, the sun on your face, and getting some fresh air that really helps us in that positioning and reframing our thought process, because we have just moved from all those physical things that are blocking us to now being outside in fresh air. So I think going outside of very literally is a big step, but I think figuratively as well, of just thinking, I like to do white paper exercises of, if I'm facing something new, rather than looking at it as, here's everything I know right now, here's my current business plan or strategy, what's the tangential next thing I could do, branching off of this, what's an adjacent market I could go after. We would tend to have a place to start, and then how do we innovate from there? But that's really limiting your approach and your process. I like to now and then just chuck out everything you know just for a short period of time and get out a blank piece of paper and just think about, if I'm approaching this from an entirely different perspective. And if you're stuck doing this, then talk to somebody about it. I love the idea of running your idea by strangers, like chatting with somebody at a farmer's market, or talking to somebody in your kid's pickup line about, like, hey, I'm trying to do this. Like, what are your thoughts? Sometimes getting an idea from somebody who has no idea what your business is, no idea what you're facing, that's the best perspective, because they aren't biased by all those other things. So sometimes they can see an actionable nugget of truth that you are too close to see. So I like that idea of also figuratively getting outside of what you know.
Oh, I love that. Okay. I'm going to leave it there because that was so good. Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, this was a great conversation, and got me wanting to run home and see what I can innovate and see what I can unlearn. That's
love it.
Yeah, I love it too. You realize how attached you get to things even when they're not working. So,
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing what you're up to in the future. I think it's going to be very exciting. So, and thank you, audience, for listening to the show today. We love bringing you the Money and You show. We love bringing you wonderful guests like Elizabeth. And please share the show. Share the show with your friends, your family. Please rate and review the show so we can continue to bring you wonderful guests and continue just enlightening you in multiple ways around money and business and life. So thank you again. We'll see you next week.